Jumanji producer Matt Tolmach on the delicate balance of remaking a Cla ssic. Remakes of beloved properties are risky business. Stay too slavish to the original and you're accused of a money grab. Steer too far away and you're not honoring the source material. But in Hollywood's risk-averse environment, a remake is often the easiest way to make a movie. The trick is threading the needle just right, ensuring your appeal to the fans of the original, while being interesting enough to lure in new audiences. With all that in mind, producer Matt Tolmach approached the reimagining of the 1995 classic Jumanji with all the delicacy not exhibited by the attacking rhinos and elephants of the original film. There are a lot of people in their 30s and 40s who hold this movie very near and dear. This was a seminal movie for them, and Robin Williams was fondly remembered for his role in it, said Tolmach, 53, of the family-friendly film that also featured a young Kirsten Dunst. It was a tipping point for visual effects in movies. And it's imprinted very vividly on people. We wanted to make a movie that honored the spirit of Robin and the legacy of the movie, yet take it in a completely different direction. These hurdles are why Tolmach, who initially began moving forward with a reboot in 2012, didn't make any significant leaps until community writer Chris McKenna walked into his office to pitch his take of Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle in 2015. Suddenly, the adventure tale, about a man sucked into a board game and the two children who save him, became an exploration of self-identity as seen through computer-generated avatars. Chris is a big dude, very, very tall, and he said to me, "I'm an avid video game player and I used to come home from school feeling all those things we all felt in high school, uncomfortable in my own body and all that, and I would escape into these avatars." Tolmach relayed about McKenna's original pitch. "That's how I would get through it. I would become whomever I wanted to be. That's what Jumanji is." McKenna, who worked on the first script with Eric Summers, his writing partner on the Lego Batman movie and the upcoming sequel to Spider-Man, Homecoming, added, "I don't love reboots. You can't have another two kids find the board game. You have to reinvent it. You have to do the opposite and go into the game. My idea was to treat it like The Breakfast Club, 4 different kids, stuck in detention together, the nerd, the jock, the princess, and the high-strung Tracy Flick type. Force them into the game they have to play and it becomes The Wizard of Oz meets The Matrix with The Breakfast Club mixed in. Their story starts with 4 kids from disparate high school universes who are forced to clean a school basement as part of detention, and are then thrown into Jumanji when they find an old video game console down there. They must work together to solve a curse if they want to return home." To flip the script, and ramp up the comedy, the filmmakers, led by director Jake Kasdan, Bad Teacher, cast the in-game avatars against their teenage archetypes. Nerdy, fearful Spencer, Alex Wolff, becomes hulking, adventurer Dr. Smolder Bravestone, played by Dwayne Johnson, strapping football star Fridge, Sir Darius Blaine, transforms into diminutive zoologist Moose Finbar, played by Kevin Hart, bookish Martha, Morgan Turner, plays ass-kicking martial arts expert Ruby Roundhouse, played by Doctor Who's Karen Gillan, and, in an inspired decision, teen queen Bethany, Madison Iceman, becomes middle-aged Professor Shelley Oberon, played by Jack Black. It was a risky choice, one that could have gone horribly wrong had Black made his portrayal of a 16-year-old girl too broad. But there are moments in the film when you actually forget he's a middle-aged man. Jack took it so seriously, and he's so proud of that, said Tolmach. He spent time with Madison. There was a real integrity to how he portrayed her. The premise of the movie rests, according to the writers, on the initial moment you meet the 4 characters in the game. That scene and its effectiveness came as quite a relief for McKenna and Summers, who had moved on to other projects and weren't on set for the shoot. Scott Rosenberg, Jeff Pinknor, and Kasdan himself took on additional writing duties after they had left. McKenna and Summers saw the film at its premiere on December 20th. "As soon as they talk to each other, you know they've pulled it off," said Summers. Matt Tolmach, producer of Jumanji. For Tolmach, Pulling off Jumanji is a culmination of sorts of his NASA-producing career that launched in 2010 when he chose to leave his high-powered executive job at Sony for a deal on the lot. I've always felt, as a kid, that the movies were a sacred space to check your troubles at the door, said Tolmach. And I've always wanted to make a movie that lived up to that and is also about that. Owning who you are and having the courage to be who you are is the most important kind of superhero story. Tolmach has Hollywood in his blood. His grandfather was renowned Hollywood agent Sam Jaffe, who represented Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall back in their heyday. It was Poppy Sam, as he was called, who pulled Tolmach out of his collegiate reverie of becoming a novelist and instead took him to the William Morris mailroom in 1986 for a career that has now spanned 3 decades, culminating in a role as co-president of production at Sony, working for Amy Pascal and with former Motion Picture Group president Doug Belgrad. There, Tolmach oversaw the Da Vinci Code films and the rise of Seth Rogen's empire. Being an executive at Sony is the greatest job you could ever have, Tolmach said. But I found myself wanting to be more involved in the day-to-day filmmaking, less involved in management and meetings. It was a humbling choice, too. Going from being a buyer to a seller means you're forced to shop your wares around town. But it's also been invigorating for Tolmach and has allowed him to make The Armstrong Lie, a documentary about disgraced cyclist Lance Armstrong, with Alex Gibney, and a new doc, What Haunts Us, about sexual predation, from his wife, Paige Tolmach, and producer Frank Marshall. On my first day shooting The Armstrong Lie, it was snowing and cold and we followed Lance around with a camera on the back of a truck, and I loved it, Tolmach said. The producer has found a sweet spot in making films audiences want to see in theaters. He's currently in production in Atlanta on Marvel's upcoming Venom movie, featuring the enlightened casting choice of Tom Hardy as the title character. And he's hired Gina Prince Bythewood to helm the Spider-Man spin-off Silver and Black. He's also behind Hulu's new series, Future Man, and is working on a low-budget passion project with director Michael Gillio. Over the years, working for lengths of time on films that sometimes bombed at the box office, Tolmach since has learned to be amenable to all the new content platforms, including streaming services. He just wants to get his projects made. We all know the movie business. There's this question mark about how do we get people to come to these movies. Places like Hulu are where people are going, Tolmach said. I remember being a studio exec in the early 2000s. And there was a sense that we could kind of do anything and it would make sense. It'll work. We were making Superbad and Pineapple Express and all those movies back in the day. And that's what the streaming services feel like now. The trick, said Tolmach, is making movies audiences still want to see in theaters, and then executing them as effectively as possible. The trap is if you start to believe that nobody wants to go to the movies and the only movies that work are the big, intellectual property ones. Then you will fall back and stop making original movies, he said. The key is how do you pivot within that and do something that's still unique, memorable, and outrageous? Jumanji does that. We took a brand that is known and beloved, and are giving people something that is totally different than what that experience was without ever violating the integrity of it. I'm very proud of it. If he's lucky, the reward will be at the box office. Use of this site constitutes acceptance of our user agreement and privacy policy.